Hello and welcome to Insights. Today we talk about the arrest of a Pakistani terrorist by our security forces shortly after he and his accomplice attacked a BSF convoy in Udhampur in Jammu and Kashmir. The captured terrorist Usman Naved alias Qasim is only the second Pakistani terrorist after Kasab to have been caught alive. The other terrorist involved in the attack was killed in retaliatory fire. The attack, the first in Udhampur in a decade and left two BSF personnel dead, came a week after the terror strike in Dinanagar, Gurdaspur, and a day after the head of Pakistan's 2611 probe confirmed that the Mumbai terror attack was indeed planned and launched from Pakistan. Today we discuss the unfolding implications of this development and whether the NSAs of India and Pakistan should meet as scheduled. And to discuss the same, we have with us in the studios an eminent panel. Please welcome Commodore Uday Bhaskar, a noted strategic affairs analyst, currently a fellow with the Society for Policy Studies. Welcome to the program, Commodore Bhaskar. Sitting next to him is Skand Ranjan Tayal. He is a former ambassador. Welcome to the program, Ambassador Tayal. We are also joined by Dr. Ashok Behuria. He is a senior fellow at the Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis. Welcome to the program, Dr. Behuria. And we'd like to tell our viewers that the Home Minister has made a statement on this issue in Lok Sabha today. He also made a statement in the upper house where he lauded the role of the locals who helped capture this terrorist and of course the role played by the BSF, the CRPF as well as the JNK police. Commodore Bhaskar, I'd like to begin with you. After Ajmal Kasab, we now have Naved, the captured terrorist, who was quickly dubbed by the media as Kasab 2 because of his uncanny resemblance to Ajmal Kasab. You know, both young men who have been indoctrinated to become terrorists. But how significant is this catch for our security forces? The fact that we have someone captured alive, how important is it?
Well, I would say that in any such operation where there is terrorism that is being directed against India and Indian assets, apprehending the perpetrator alive would always be a very valuable quote-unquote evidence as far as India is concerned. And it is true that if you compare what happened in Udhampur with the Gurdaspur incident, which took place 10 days ago, there the perpetrators were all neutralized and we lost much of the valuable evidence that could have provided some links as far as the constituencies or the groups that might have supported their activities. So to that extent, I would say that the Udhampur incident and the arrest of Naved is significant, but I would not go to the extent of making this comparison with Kasab and Mumbai. That is where I felt personally that perhaps the Indian response yesterday, both at the level of the state as also in the public space that civil society inhabits, particularly the media, and now that social media has also become an important indicator, to me it seemed that the response was disproportionate. And I'd even go to the extent of saying that perhaps the fact that the media was given the kind of access to a terrorist, a perpetrator of a very vile act, also seemed very incongruous. Personally, I would have said that once he was apprehended, he should have been taken away to custody and the judicial process should have been allowed to start. Instead of which, I think we had a rather extravagant kind of exposure to this particular, the terrorist, Naved. He has many names and whatever he may have said. So I think sometimes this kind of media attention also distorts what you might call as the contours of what we are trying to address. And very regrettably, I hope you'll allow me to take this liberty and say this on Lok Sabha TV, I think the political discourse between the government and the opposition party also was not very edifying, you know, because we were going back to a lot of what you might call as the scoring of brownie points. And I think in a way it dilutes what you might call as the kind of gravitas that is required to deal with such a case, because we are aware that India is now preparing for the NSA level talks.
Absolutely.
This would have been very useful, I would say again, evidence, Though I don't think Pakistan needs any more evidence. You know, for India, when you go back from Mumbai 2008 to where we are now, it's not lack of evidence, but lack of integrity perhaps on the side of Pakistan about the import of supporting terrorism that is directed against India. So I classify this or qualify it as important, but not to be over-interpreted.
Okay, so you think it's purely incidental that we have captured.
But there was a fair amount of luck, I would say, in terms of how both Gurdaspur and Udhampur took place.
Right.
And I think the worst case scenario, Amandra, is in the event we did not have this combination of favorable, shall we say, exigencies, both Gurdaspur and Udhampur could have led to much higher death toll.
Absolutely.
In which case, I think there would have been an enormous amount of what you might call as pressure on the government of the day to act.
Right.
And that is where I think we need to be able to very objectively take stock and say what would be an effective Indian response.
Right, we will talk about it. We will come back to it later. But of course, the local people who helped capture him,
I think they need to be applauded.
They need to be applauded in preventing a tragedy of much greater proportions. Ambassador Tyal, it appears that there is no abatement in the terror acts of Pakistan against India, and what's more, every time there's an effort to talk, a terrorist outrage occurs. Lately, we've seen from across the border, there's been a rise in terrorist activities. What prospect do you think is there for our being able to put an end to, these kind of incidents?
I think this kind of incidents were expected. Any serious analyst of who is watching India-Pakistan relations would have definitely concluded that even after UFA's statement, which was rather positive, there are elements in Pakistan who do not want that process to continue to go along any further. They want to continue to inflict damage on India for various reasons, ideological reasons. They treat India as a religious enemy, as a political enemy, as a strategic enemy. And these are all supported by elements of the army, ISI, etc. So it's a very, very vicious cocktail of anti-India elements in Pakistan. Now, I hold the view that we have to deal with Pakistan at several levels. One level, of course, is of day-to-day incidents of firing at the border or this kind of infiltration and terrorist attacks. They should be dealt with locally. You deal with the terrorists. And also, at some point, in some way, there should be a retaliation. Now, the border firing, there is definitely a tit-for-tat policy, and perhaps it is working, and Pakistan is a little surprised by this robustness of India's responses. Now, terrorism is a different cup of tea, because how do you really retaliate against terrorism? We don't have terrorists. It can be a surgical strike or what can be done, how it can be done. That is a matter which I am sure our present political establishment and security establishment is dealing with in some way. But by the nature of things, it would be very secret and it will not be possible how exactly it is being done. But the other level where I have very strong views that the political dialogue with Pakistan must continue. If the two prime ministers have decided on a certain course of action, it was anticipated, it was expected, it was known that certain forces will try to derail it. So we should not fall in that trap, and the NSA level meeting should go ahead, and then both sides can put before each other whatever grievances they have, whatever evidence they have, and then hope that there is actual redressal of those grievances. Now, for instance, as far as Pakistan is concerned, very clearly in UFA it was said that the voice samples will be given.
Right.
Now again, the whole judicial process and the state is somehow trying to emasculate that process. So the honesty or the sincerity of the Pakistani political system can be revealed, but this is just one instance. There can be some other instances also. But the political dialogue must continue at different levels, and track 2 should be activated again. Track 2, Ambassador Lama was heading it earlier. The present government, because see, all the time when NSAs meet or foreign secretaries meet, it becomes a media event, and immediately the terrorists and the people who are antagonistic to the process will try to derail it. So at track 2, it can be done more silently behind the scenes, and that will be more effective.
All right. Okay. On that note, we slip into a short break in the program. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Dr. Behuria, I'll continue with you. How do you view the timing of it all? You know, the three important developments that have taken in the recent days. You know, less than 10 days ago, we had the Gurdaspur attack, and then just 2 days ago, we had a Pakistan investigator saying that all allegations made by India on 26/11 were actually true. And then we have the terror strike in Udhampur, and the terrorist, according to the media, admitting that he is a native of Pakistan, hailing from Faisalabad.
You know, if you followed the events in Pakistan after Ufa, you could see it coming. If you look at the vernacular media in Pakistan, they were all saying that in Ufa, Nawaz Sharif, in fact, sacrificed the cause of the Kashmiris, and this is not the way the government should pursue dialogue with India. And they were very, very critical of Nawaz Sharif. And fast forward to Gurdaspur. After Gurdaspur, even a section of the Urdu media came out and said that it was in fact a handiwork of Indian intelligence agencies, just to ensure that the talks do not move forward. Interestingly quite. And then immediately after that, you had this Tariq Khosa revelations, who was a former FIA head and had also investigated into this Mumbai attack. And he came out with this revelations that the Pakistan had in fact got enough evidence of Pakistani collaboration in this project. So, but that was of a different caliber altogether, because that was basically putting the army in the dock, the military in the dock. So, in that sense, that was not there to ruffle the feathers. That was not there intended to stop the talks. But perhaps it explains the civil-military divide. It explains maybe an individual initiative to come out with facts to basically to show it to the Pakistanis that we have not been doing well as far as the Mumbai attack was concerned. And immediately after that, you had this Udhampur attack. So you could easily see that there was a pattern in it which didn't want the talks to move forward. If you look at the Pakistani media, in fact there was a gag order almost on these events. The Tariq Khosa thing has not been commented upon.
Right. Hardly two newspapers have reported.
Only Dawn. Yes. It came out in Dawn and someone else or some other newspaper. But in the Urdu media, I'm saying, nobody referred to that.
Right.
And also, I was noting today also, this Udhampur thing, there's a complete blackout. It has not been there in the English media as well.
Right.
So that means, there is an effort at certain level in Pakistan to not to allow these talks to take place in the first place. And second, I think if you look at the Corps Commanders meeting day before yesterday and the statements by Rahil Sharif, he is also indirectly saying that there is some external hand which is interfering with the Afghan process. There are external hands trying to disturb internal security in Pakistan. So I think that if you put two and two together, it appears that the military establishment is trying to involve India in all kinds of problems that Pakistan is facing today. So in this scenario, the talks may not lead us anywhere. But I would agree with my previous speakers that the talks should go on. I think this offensive,
fact, there are reports in the media
dialogue
that
offensive from our side, from our side, the offensive, the peace offensive should go on. And as Ambassador said, that this will provide an opportunity for us to at least encash on this catch that we have now. That we have enough evidence now that Pakistanis have been coming and that trying to derail this process. I think this has to be conveyed at least to the civilian establishment there, civilian government there, that we are sincere, we want to talk, but you have to bring some amount of sanity into your perspectives as far as the dialogue is concerned.
Commodore Bhaskar, where do you see the NSA talks going that was slated to take place just a few weeks from now, although there was no official confirmation on the dates from the Pakistani side?
My sense is that this is the first time that India and Pakistan would be meeting formally at the level of the National Security Advisor.
Right.
So to that extent, I would say that perhaps the current value lies in the process itself, meaning that for both countries, terrorism and the support to terror is a very big issue, in as much as we are concerned about the support of what we call as the deep state to various agents who are engaged in terrorism. As Dr. Behuria pointed out just now, in Pakistan there is a similar narrative that Indian agencies, Indian entities are supporting various activities, so much so that yesterday, it's very interesting, in the domestic politics of Sindh, the Chief Minister is drawing attention to a statement about India is not required to play any role as far as the Muhajirs are concerned, meaning that is a very deep level of what you might call as the accusations that are being made.
Right.
So to that extent, I think the NSA level talks, the framework, would allow them to meet in what you might call as a professional context, because they are the apex of their respective intelligence agencies.
Right.
And we are aware that all professional intelligence agencies have a reasonably good estimate about the competence of the other side. So I think it is useful in providing this particular forum, but I think our expectations should be relatively modest, meaning that it is very unlikely that post the NSA talks, there would be any significant change as far as Pakistan's policy is concerned.
Right.
Because the representative at the NSA level talks is really quote unquote a civilian, Mr. Sartaj Aziz. It is not a retired general, it is not somebody who has actually been DG ISI or otherwise. And I just want to extend the ambit and say that we are now dealing with a Pakistan and a Pakistani military in particular that I think has been in a way emboldened by the support it has received from China. We saw that in the Security Council in relation to Lakhvi.
Right.
And now a sense that the major powers are actually acknowledging Pakistan's role in Afghanistan. You know, this whole Mullah Omar business, the peace process, the Murray talks and so on.
Right.
So my sense as to why Pakistan is perhaps taking this forward in a more assertive way is the feeling that they are in the driver's seat. And that is where I think the NSA level talks would give us an indication about how Pakistan wants to move ahead.
But Pakistan Army also has a battle to fight with the Taliban. Don't you think, you know, that's something that
it is? I mean, if you, I mean, I think again Ashok made this point that the Corps Commanders Conference, General Raheel Sharif has repeatedly said that we are now going to deal with all our challenges, both internal and external. The whole Peshawar, you know, sort of scar, the TTP, it's a very big issue for them. But again, I would say tentatively that there is a feeling that they're perhaps losing control of the Afghan Taliban. Because the Mullah Omar death, the announcement, and the various factions that have emerged, and the resistance that we are now seeing, even to the appointment of Haqqani,
right.
These are all indicators that perhaps the Afghan story is not moving as per the plot in Rawalpindi.
Right.
Our concern is, what is the Rawalpindi Murid ke connection? And are Gurdaspur and Udhampur extensions of what you might call as the liaison or the kind of nexus that we are very, very concerned about,
right.
which is between the Pakistan Army, the ISI and Murid K. And I come back to this point, this is where I believe that the NSAs, Mr. Doval, he is one of India's, you know, leading professionals as far as the agencies are concerned. I'm sure that when he is able to meet his counterpart, this is the kind of detail
right.
that could be brought forward. And I repeat this, it's not that Pakistan doesn't know. I mean, the Tariq Khosa article is all about the detail.
Right.
The engine number of the dinghy, the money trail, all of that is available with the Pakistani authorities,
right.
the judicial system. But they are deliberately adopting what has been described as dilatory tactics. So my sense is that Udhampur will only add to that particular story.
Okay.
We have the identity of Navid. His brother is supposed to be a lecturer. So I imagine that these are the questions or these are the issues that will be put on the table. And it would help. And I do hope that India is able to really package the story, as it were, for consumption by the Pakistani side.
Right.
Meaning use all the available tools so that our case is buttressed also in the public domain in Pakistan.
Absolutely. Ambassador Tayal, you know, if the two NSAs meet, it will be a good opportunity for India to confront Pakistan with the evidence of, you know, these two terror strikes, Gurdaspur and Udhampur, and also, you know, drive home the significance or rather the centrality of terror in our relationship.
That is true, but as Uday Bhaskar said, these things are well known,
right.
And it is not that it is now more detailed or something else has happened and some more evidence can be given and some more facts can be given.
But you know, it is certainly a departure from our past policy of not talking whenever there has been a terror
yes,
attack.
so the NSAs are very, they have full confidence of their Prime Minister. I think that is very important. Both Mr. Debal on our side and Mr. Sartaj Aziz has been with Nawaz Sharif for a very long time.
Right.
So ultimately, I think at that level they have to talk about the vision for the region. What do they want Pakistan to be? Do they want Pakistan to be in Afghanistan? What do they want to be India-Pakistan relations? Do they see something for India in Afghanistan at all? The details are ad nauseum. One can keep on saying you sent terrorists and you had this gun. They have all the information and they have not acted upon it. And the whole state system, whether it's judiciary, whether it's investigative agency, they are all collaborating, colluding together so that there is no action. That Jamaat-ud-Dawa continues to function, Hafiz Saeed continues to pontificate and criticize and threaten India from platforms which are funded by Pakistan government and particularly the government of Punjab. So at an ideological level, what is happening in Pakistan now? You look at the body language of this youngster, 20-year-old who has been caught. He is happy.
Right.
Either he is drugged or he has some kind of an intoxication of ideology. Now that is very, very dangerous for Pakistan itself. And we will have to deal with this. We will be able to deal with that. But it will poison the whole atmosphere in Pakistan. Does Pakistan want to go on that route? That I think with the Prime Minister, as Prime Minister Modi keeps on saying that for South Asia, Garibi is the main issue. Development is the main issue. One gets this feeling sometimes that Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif understands. He has a businessman, he has economic background, he has the support of Muslim League his own party and this Jamaat-ud-Dawa type, but ultimately he wants to do something for the people of Pakistan, that they may become more prosperous, there should be more energy. And now at that level, if there can be some kind of an understanding that you please control your forces in Pakistan, which are inimical to India, and otherwise these things will keep on happening. If they do not control Hafiz Saeed, if they do not control Lashkar-e-Taiba in whatever incarnation it may be, this kind of incidents will keep on happening, and the state is not doing enough to control that. I think from our side, that will have to be presented.
Dr. Behuria, do you think it will in any way change the reaction that we get from Pakistan, that of denial, which is usually their first and the last reaction?
No, I think the denial will continue because, you are talking to a civilian NSA. He is not, as Commander Bhaskar said, he has never been in intelligence or he has never headed any intelligence agency.
Right.
In that sense, I think Mr. Doval from our side, I think brings a lot of gravitas into the entire discussion there, because as I note, in the Pakistani media, there is a lot of concern about Doval being chosen as our NSA, and ever since he has been chosen, there is a lot of sense of insecurity he has induced in the Pakistani security establishment. You can only see it if you go through the Urdu media of Pakistan. So, in that sense, NSA being tipped off to conduct a dialogue with Pakistan is very, very interesting and very, very welcome. And I think, going by the media reports that I get to see from Pakistan, there will be an effort to bring on the table some tentative evidence that they have with them on India's role in Balochistan and also, interestingly quite, in the Peshawar tragedy. This is what we get to hear. And they would say that, if Sartaj is going there, he should raise these issues rather than try to push the trade and commerce agenda between the two countries. So, in that sense, I think there is no sense whatsoever about, owning up the Mumbai tragedy or carrying the investigations to their logical conclusion. So, I don't think, this civilian military this divide will be breached only when the dialogue will take place between India and Pakistan. I would rather suspect that this kind of an engagement with the civilian establishment will alienate the military further. So this civilian military divide in Pakistan will basically disallow any conclusion to the dialogue that we are going to have.
All right, on that note, it's time for us to slip into yet another break in the program. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Commander Bhaskar, I'll continue with you. As we've discussed, Pakistan continues to deny its involvement in terrorist acts emanating from its soil against India. And we also talked about how the Pakistani media too echoes the position of the state. But how do you view the revelation of the ex-FIA chief, Mr. Tariq Khosa? Do you think that will make Pakistan, change their stand and own up? how do you view this exposure by him?
I wish I could have said an emphatic yes that Mr. Tariq Khosa's article and similar voices in Pakistan would make that difference. But I'm afraid the reality is far more bleak. Meaning that voices like that of Mr. Khosa, and there are others, in all fairness, we know some of their names because they appear both in the Pakistani media and some of them do get carried in the Indian media. But I am afraid these are lone voices, meaning that the so-called liberal Pakistani voice, I think, is increasingly getting intimidated. Because if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, there have been a number of such instances. I don't want to take the names of individuals mainly because of their own safety. But we are aware that whenever a Pakistani public intellectual or a voice has said something that in a way corrects the distorted narrative that comes out of what you might call as the deep state, those voices have either been silenced or they have been intimidated. So I really fear, I hope that Mr. Khosa's personal safety is not compromised. But let me also add, what Mr. Khosa said in the Dawn article is not quite a revelation. As I was saying earlier, this had been provided formally, officially to the Pakistani judicial system. And I gather that when we had UPA 2 and Mr. Chidambaram was the Home Minister, this particular information had been conveyed to the Indian side also that this is available. On the basis of that, Pakistan prosecuted the 6 other individuals who were accused in Mumbai. What to me is important or relevant is that this kind of an article has appeared in a forum like the Dawn.
Right.
We have to remind ourselves that Dawn is a newspaper that was started by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So it has a certain pedigree. It has a certain credibility in Pakistan. So to that extent, I think what we are now seeing is the post-Peshawar trauma. That after the attack by the TTP on the school children, I think Pakistan is going through its own internal kind of mini catharsis. Because if you read the subtext of what Mr. Khosa said, he said it's time for us to get our act together.
Absolutely.
We have to stop this kind of support to terror because at the end of the day it comes back and it scorches you. That is something that other people have also said in Pakistan.
But what made him do it? Do you think there was a design behind it to do it at this juncture?
I can only conjecture that there is perhaps a small group or some voices that are trying to be heard. And in a way they are supporting what Mr. Nawaz Sharif had done in UFA. Because the opening paragraph of that particular article is, we must welcome UFA. And at the same time, of course, as Ashok has said, he lists all the Pakistani grievances, Balochistan, Peshawar, help, etc., and saying this is a place where the 2 NSAs should be able to provide whatever credible evidence that they have. And I think maybe, Amandra, this could be called a silver lining. That today in Pakistan there are some voices, and let me also add that there are some military voices also. It is not as if the Pakistani Fauj speaks in a uniform voice when it comes to, yes, the serving people toe the line. But of late, whatever little bit I have seen of the Pakistani media, the cyberspace, the blogs, there are some retired military people who are making much the same case, saying that it's time we got our own act together and stopped the support to terror, because somewhere there is this anxiety, which I think Skand Ambassador Tayal had just said, Pakistan does not want to become the next Afghanistan.
But then again, there are double standards.
For instance,
the Supreme Court has ruled recently that terror accused will now be tried in military courts, and we all know how their courts are somewhat kinder to the terror accused against India.
My only limited point is that there are some kind of developments that we should also monitor. For instance, the assassination of the Punjab governor, Salman Taseer. That case is finally moving. I mean, that is a very big deal given the fact that Qadri, the assassin, had been welcomed by the lawyers at that time, saying that he's upholding rose petals, etc. That particular case is now being taken forward, and I think the Supreme Court of Pakistan has taken a position where it has upheld the conviction of Qadri. So these are minor glimmers, minor, I would say, shall we say, possibilities. One doesn't want to again over-interpret. I would locate Mr. Khosa's article in Dawn in that particular context. But at the same time, I think the Rawalpindi sort of corps commanders and their control over the 3 issues that concern India, Kashmir, nuclear weapons and terrorism,
Right.
they are not going to, I think, allow any kind of movement there. And Mr. Nawaz Sharif is in this very tragic position, if I may say so, that he was the architect of the Lahore Accord with Mr. Vajpayee of 99, when we had the most, I would say, promising India-Pakistan nuclear accord.
Right.
It got torpedoed in Kargil. So I hope that Mr. Nawaz Sharif is able to get the support of these voices so that there is some kind of a high-level political dialogue where all these issues can be put on the table.
Ambassador Tel, what do you think? It seems the Pakistan army is on a sort of a collision course with the civilian establishment there. They have gained an upper hand. Where do you see all of this going then?
See, Pakistan army has regained the upper hand after the Imran Khan and his party really weakened Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and weakened democracy in Pakistan. It was a very, very unfortunate period for Pakistan. But Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's instinct, I think, has been to come to some kind of accommodation with India, as was indicated Lahore process. And it's generally said that Musharraf mounted the whole Kargil operation, keeping Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in the dark. So I would say that somehow the two prime ministers should try to wrest the initiative and the narrative away from the terrorism narrative. And the relation between India and Pakistan are really being determined by Jamaat-ud-Dawa, by ISI, and what we have done with Bangladesh, 500 megawatt of electricity going there. They should just disregard all the negative propaganda coming in the media and somehow try to establish some kind of a favorable narrative between the people of India and people of Pakistan. And they should, I think, both of them should honor Salman Khan for this film. where I think it brings the narrative back to human being. As Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee used to say, insaniyat in the context of Kashmir. So why should the narrative remain confined to, or should be, or the initiative should be only with the people who are sponsoring, financing and undertaking terrorism? That is a story which should be dealt with at that level, whatever happens, and all kinds of eat ka jawab patthar se dijiye is my. But there should, another narrative should be introduced where the people of India and Pakistan have something positive to talk about each other, have something positive to say about each other, whether it is by way of trade and whether it is by way of electricity. And two prime ministers, two governments should disregard. There will be a lot of opposition, but I think they are strong enough to disregard that and try to enlarge the constituency which is there, as Commodore Uday Bhaskar said, even in army, which is trying to be moderate, which is trying to put some kind of sense, sanity and moderation in the discourse. That element of Pakistani society, whether in the army, whether among the people, would be strengthened.
Right, but Dr. Behuria, what about public opinion in India? 2611 continues to be an emotive issue. Until the time there is justice, any progress with Pakistan will not be, it will be very difficult to sell it to the public in India.
Absolutely. I think people in India are less prepared for peace within Pakistan without, bringing this Mumbai thing to a closure. So in that sense, you are correct that there is a lot of angst in the minds of the public in India about Pakistan. But the informed opinion in India thinks that it is in India's interest also to take the peace process forward. But my hunch is that the people in Pakistan, especially people in Pakistan, also want it to happen, by the way. But there are many sane voices, as Commodore Bhaskar said, who have been repeatedly coming out with writings that India and Pakistan should bury the hatchet and there should be new dawn welcoming them in future. But the problem about the Pakistani power dynamics is, as it stands today, as I noted earlier, at the cost of sounding very repetitive, the divide between the civilian and the military establishments.
Right.
And at this juncture, I find the military establishment is in no mood to take the dialogue process forward. You know, there is intense pressure on both the sides, both India and government, from the international community, as Afghanistan is turning over a new leaf, you know, to come to terms with each other. But the problem about Pakistan is there are many other players as well. For example, all these jihadi constituencies. The other day I was hearing that even Jawahari section in Al Qaeda, they are saying that, you know, it is time for India and Pakistan to go for a war. If they go for a war, then the politicians of Pakistan who are now wanting to befriend India will take a step backward and, you know, try to disengage from the peace process. So, and we must also remember that Nawaz Sharif will not sell this peace process to the people forever. The moment he finds the popular feelings turning against this peace process, he will also back out. We have also noted that during last few months, most of his civilian ministers, they have come out heavily against India. And the defense minister, the foreign minister, even Sartaj Aziz himself, he has on very many occasions have said that, you know, India has attacked Pakistan 112 times, you know, during the last few months. So in that sense, you know, basically it will depend on how the military, you know, wants it up, whether the military wants it up. If the military wants up the peace process, I will find some progress in the talks. But otherwise, I would say that India, from the Indian side, I think there's the spirit of engaging in a dialogue should not, you know, escape us. And we should not be found wanting to engage with Pakistan, because that will keep the peace constituency engaged, and also that will also keep the civilian government some respite in the international, at the international level.
Okay, but Commodore Bhaskar, don't you think it's time to have a closer look on our Pakistan policy and, you know, evolve a line that will work?
You know, Amandra, we've said this for 20 years. I'm sorry for saying it in this manner, but I recall that when we had Prime Minister Vajpayee and we went through what you might call as the euphoria of Lahore and the reality of Kargil, from then to now, we've had 3 prime ministers, as it were, meaning we had the Vajpayee tenure, we had Dr. Manmohan Singh for 1 decade, and now Mr. Modi as Prime Minister. I think it has been a political challenge to be able to evolve, again, I repeat this, an effective and affordable policy with Pakistan, knowing fully well that the ontological orientation of the deep state is hatred against India.
Right.
Because in a way, the existence and the primacy of the Pakistani military is predicated on keeping that particular, shall we say, orientation and sentiment alive. So it's an inherently, the, shall we say, playing field is sloped against India. But notwithstanding that, I think we must credit and commend Prime Ministers Vajpayee, Dr. Manmohan Singh, and now Mr. Modi for trying to find that balance. So my personal recommendation has repeatedly been that we have to have the ability to use this analogy of rowing a boat, that you row it on one side and you hold water on the other so that you can turn the boat around. So I think we also have a duty to keep Indian public opinion reasonably informed that this suggestion that every terrorist attack is cause for, you know, getting into a military conflict with Pakistan is not a desirable option.
Right.
It is not an affordable option. It is not a prudent option. It's not an ethical option. India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we condone terrorism or that we accept whatever comes. I think that is the balance that the professionals can find, which is why the NSA level talks, as also the DGMOs, the BSF and the Rangers can provide some kind of lowering the temperature at the tactical level and create the space at the politico-diplomatic level. Knowing fully well that GHQ in Rawalpindi has got a certain agenda that we have to try and bring about some changes.
Right. Ambassador Tyal, what can be our policy towards Pakistan that will work, or you think we are doomed forever under the constant threat of violence from our borders?
I'm basically a pessimist as far as the long-term relations between India and Pakistan are concerned, because the way their polity is changing, how the whole society is becoming more religion-oriented, and the liberals are losing space. In long-term direction of Pakistani society, polity, military, etc. is inimical to whatever India stands for, secularism, inclusive, liberalism, etc. So that is at the ideological level, that is a danger. That means we will continue to be adversaries in different ways. But I would say that we should have a two-track policy. One, this long-standing Pakistani policy of hurting India with 1,000 cuts, we should be able to give at least 100 cuts, if not 1,000. And it should not be painless and for Pakistan, it should not be costless or very little cost for Pakistan. So that, I think the present dispensation as it is in India and is very conscious of that, and I think they believe in that. How they execute it, that is a detail which can be done. But in the long term, ultimately, we are neighbors and we have to deal with each other, we have to live with each other. So whatever little constituency of liberals and the people who want accommodations in India or who are looking for some kind of prosperity for their people rather than an apocalyptic view of jihad and some kind of creative chaos, and from chaos some pristine civilization will emerge. I mean, that has to, those kind of elements have to be isolated. So political dialogue at some level must continue.
All right. A quick word from you, Dr. Behuria. Given the situation within Pakistan, what can we expect?
I may sound a little controversial here. I think, if for the talks to succeed, there has to be at least two things. Either the Pakistani civilian establishment will find a way of injecting army also into the peace process, or we might evolve this innovative, dialogic structure where we can have the military also talking to us at certain level. Otherwise, I don't see any hope of this talks taking us to a logical conclusion.
All right. On that note, it's time for me to wrap up this discussion on Insight. I'd like to thank all my guests for coming to the studios. It was a pleasure having you all here. That's it for now in today's Insight. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.